Man, I love talking to you sometimes. I really do. I have a great time. Let me talk about something else because you're a big believer and a fighter for civil liberties, and that's big to me. Obviously, you heard about that. But what would be your plans to curtail the behavior of these big tech companies like Google, Facebook, YouTube, who are just getting away with, stomping on our civil liberties through a way of blacklisting us, shadow banning us? Not only that, they're putting forth their rhetoric and really controlling the conversation. What are you going to do about it?
Are you familiar with SESTA and FOSTA?
No.
Let's start there. It's good that we're having this conversation. So there was a recent attack on internet freedom, and it relates to the set of issues you're talking about. It's a little complicated, but follow me here. This is basically the government, Kamala Harris in particular, and centrists, liberals, bragging about reforms that they said were going to protect sex workers and victims of sex trafficking. That was what these laws were supposed to do. What they in fact did was make tech platforms liable for the content that their users post. Now, that might seem innocuous, like who cares if a tech company has to pay some more money because they're liable for what somebody else does, except think of the incentive. You talked about the intervention of tech companies to silence us, for instance, right?
Yeah.
And one reason they might silence us, one reason they've already started silencing some communities of people who were previously internet users is because, at least in the context of sex trafficking, sex work, the platforms are forced to bear criminal and potential civil liability, or civil liability for user-generated speech, meaning that when users want to, in the case of many sex workers, vet their clients online, to keep themselves safe from being harmed, as many of them are at risk to be at harm if they're on the street, right? That means that the companies then could face a lawsuit by the government. So what do the companies do? Of course, the companies start censoring the users.
Yeah.
And so this internet censorship has been encouraged by government policy recently that shreds both the First Amendment and the rights of some workers, particularly workers in the sex industry. And I feel very strongly that for the internet and free speech is critical, and particularly for people who use it to stay safe. And this idea that that Kamala Harris is going to run around the country bragging about placing a bunch of vulnerable people at risk of physical violence because she wanted to score political points and because she doesn't understand how free speech works online. Yeah. In my mind, that's disqualifying. And reversing SESTA FOSTA and restoring free speech is the first part of that agenda. Yeah. Second part, for me, is eroding executive secrecy. Democratic transparency is the key to guarding civil liberties, whether from violations by corporate tech giants or by government intelligence agencies, or, as Edward Snowden shared with us, the intersection between them, which is profound, pervasive, and I would say entirely corrupt. And also hidden by layers of executive secrecy, not just enforced by the White House, enforced by Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi has a set of House rules that deny every member of Congress, except for a handful of her handpicked deputies, staffed with security clearance. What that means is that, for instance, the CIA's potential role in right-wing resource coups in Venezuela, Bolivia, and Brazil in the last year alone, nobody knows exactly what the CIA was doing there. The background of the recent assassination of the Iranian general, all of the facts there are unknown. Nobody knows. And it's not just because the Trump administration is hiding them from Congress and the public. He's doing it with the support of the Democratic Speaker of the House. And I want to press this point and make this really clear, because this is kind of why I'm running for Congress. I am kept up at night by constitutional crisis. It's not an abstract thing to me. I understand too well what is going down, and I see too clearly what the future will look like if we don't get a handle on our institutions before they, the gaping maw of fascism and the looming cliff of climate chaos, swallow what remains of our civilization. I feel very strongly here that we need to practice independence in our institutions. It's the essential genius that explains the constitutional design. Congress is supposed to fight the executive branch, not facilitate it. And when you have a democratically controlled House protecting the executive secrets of a criminal Republican White House, even as showing up for a theatrical impeachment process, we have a problem. And especially this idea of allowing Congress to get access to the facts. In my mind, it's disqualifying that Speaker Pelosi is leaning on the scale to keep Congress in the dark. And note that not a single member in Congress can talk about it, right? They all labor under her thumb. So you'll never hear Ilhan Omar or AOC or Rashida or Ayanna talk about this because they can't. right? And so I feel some privilege in being able even to invoke this line of critique. If there's any central frustration I've had on the campaign, it's that more people don't understand this, the role that Speaker Pelosi has played in unfortunately facilitating CIA torture, NSA surveillance, wars for profit, who knows what else.
Yeah.
Genocide in Brazil. I mean, these are objects of dire crisis and controversy that we need to have transparency over. So the top of my civil liberties agenda, in addition to reversing SESTA and FOSTA and restoring free speech online, is to fight executive secrecy, expand democratic transparency. The single biggest thing we can do for that is to remove Nancy Pelosi from the speakership so that Congress can have an independent voice issuing unbiased rules that give members of Congress access to executive secrets.
I'm glad you think it's the number one issue, too, as well. Our civil liberties are under attack, and you're out there to protect them.
Doing my best. We're all in this together.
You got it.